We have how to get involved in the security community and preserving the past for the future with Dr. Meg Layton. Hi, how are you?
I'm good. Good to see you, Angela. How are
You
you?
too. Doing great.
Hey,
Looking forward to your talk.
well, I'm a little anxious to close it out, but I figure after the last talk on the cameras and taking the photographs, preserving them is a nice transition. So,
Absolutely.
um, I'm going to share my screen, and you're going to tell me it looks good.
It does look good.
Awesome. Okay. Just so you know, Angela, when I switch to the second part of the talk, I will no longer be able to see the screen because I actually will turn around at that point. So
Okay.
if something happens, just give me a verbal cue that I have to address something on my end.
Will do.
Okay,
All
thank
right.
you.
You're welcome.
Okay, so um, there's a 1675 letter by Isaac Newton that says, "If I have seen further, it is by standing on the shoulders of giants." And a large part of this sentiment is having other folks lift you up to take you further. And the InfoSec community is a great way to do this. Making sure you preserve your learnings is a great way to lift up others into the futures. Getting involved in the community is a popular response when new people ask, how can I learn more about security? A lot of people answer, you should get involved in the community. But that response seldom answers the how for people who are just breaking into the field. It's almost like you need the secret decoder ring to be able to break into the secret decoder community. The wonderful thing about the field is that it's constantly changing, which means everybody has something to contribute. So here's a little bit about what you need to know about me. I've been around 20 years in security, 30 years in tech. I'm an adjunct professor for classes in cybersecurity that include risk, network forensics, introduction to cybersecurity, and I've been a cyber patriot mentoring coach for the last several years. I have a whole slew of certifications after my name, but the more important information is that I am a mom, a teacher, a traveler, a Buffy fan, a passionate lifelong learner, and I occasionally break into 80s songs. So that's what you need to know about me. I did a lot of research on the definition of community. And so I put together this little word cloud of kind of what came up when I said, okay, what makes a community? And I discovered that in general, the formal definitions talked a lot about common attitudes and common interests and goals. And they talked a lot about sharing. When I talk to my children or my classes about community, I think these are missing a fundamental part of what makes a community. You need both the give and the take. What I mean by this is that you can be working towards a common goal and still not feel like you are part of a community. Perhaps you are working towards a common goal as part of your job. You have been tasked as part of a PTA committee. That's a little different than an actual community. A community requires individuals to interact in their commonality, to give as well as to receive. And without that, the community sort of dies off. In Jane Franklin's wonderful book, Insecurity, she talks about a posse, a small group of people that you can count on when the going gets tough. And I would argue that if you have a posse, they likely will provide you insights into your community. She then goes on to talk about weak ties and building a wider community connection so that you can access different types of thinking and sort out different types of challenges. That concept is based on sociologist Mark Granovetter, who talks about how to ensure you build connections which are loose and diverse. And when you're building out your community, you really want to make sure that your connections are loose and diverse. So when you're looking around and trying to evaluate your community, the best place to start is just look around you. InfoSec is a giant ocean of people, of interests. It's not so much a community as an ecosystem when you say the InfoSec community. So you want to narrow it down. You want to narrow it down to what have you found useful? What makes you feel like you belong? What interests do you have in common? what do you wish you knew more about? What do you enjoy most? And it's important to note here that everybody's community doesn't look the same. People have different goals, they have different interests, and they have different lived experiences. You want to ensure that you have enough diversity so that your community has a path to expand your views. I use this graphic down in the corner because a long time ago, when my children were just born, I had this wonderful kind of chat room where we called ourselves the Geek Moms. And then I found a sort of corner of the chat room that were InfoSec people. And then I found a kind of corner of that room where we were people who would do CTFs really late at night, because that's when we were up with our children. And so we would only do them that late at night. And we would always make a team together, and it was just kind of fun that way. So this is my Danger Will Robinson slide. Lots of people take the idea that they want to be a contributor to the community and think of it as another chore, something to do in addition to what you are already doing. Please don't take this to be the point of the talk. At no point am I saying that what you are doing right now in the middle of a pandemic, in light of new and interesting challenges and commuting patterns with new and strange sleep patterns, I am in no way saying that what you are doing right now isn't enough. If your goal of the moment is to come out the other side of the pandemic without having lost your mind, that is a wonderful goal. More power to you. Heck, if your goal today is to get everyone fed and everyone in the house into a pair of pants, that's a great goal. Go ahead and do that. I applaud that. If your goal is to have learned to code one thing, that's awesome. Don't be left feeling this way. At no point should somebody come up to you and ask you these questions and make you feel like SpongeBob here. If these are your goals, that's awesome. If your goal and public tools and writing things and talking gives you higher levels of anxiety, then these are not your goals, and that's okay. Recognize these questions for what they are: random gatekeeping, which says more about the person asking the question than it says about you. It's likely them saying, look at this thing I did and praise me because I am cool, which you can find out by just asking the same question back. The most important thing when you get involved in something is to be honest with yourself about what you have and what you want, especially right now. So I'm going to tell you what my friend Steve says, which is, hey, don't hate people because they don't have CVEs. You're being a jerk. And he said we could cite it as needed. So here you go, Steve. Here's your citation. So noted. So now here's where you're really at the crux. What can you contribute? If you're new, think about what you can share. How often do you share? Oftentimes, people who are new think they don't have enough of something to contribute. You're enough. And so this is where I often tell people, you're enough, and what you have is different than what I already know. One perspective to me today of how I broke into InfoSec from somebody who's just on that part of the journey is super useful to me. I broke in 20 years ago. I guarantee you, your journey is different than mine. Everyone is looking for what someone else knows. Last year, I said something in Twitter about how if you are presented with data before you do anything, it is good to trust but verify. To which somebody had answered, times my data was wrong and how stupid I looked afterwards might be my new talk topic. I would totally go to that talk. That is a talk I would go to because I don't think we talk enough about some of the mistakes we've all made. So when you're thinking about this, remember that not everyone can share the same way. So if a way you can contribute is blogs or talks or coaching or mentoring, those are great ways. But also think about how you can support, what you can support, and how do you support. If you have a favorite conference or cause, a lot of the conferences, especially the smaller ones, are run by volunteers. Being a good audience, being a good cheerleader, a good supporter is so important. Of course, there's a possibility of supporting with money, but also retweet, amplify voices, do a paper review. So many of us need extra eyes on those papers. planning, implementation, all that sort of thing is so important. Think about what you can contribute. How can you contribute? And again, you want to repeat with other communities. As I said before, everybody's community doesn't look the same, and you're not the member of only one community. You have many, many communities. So it's not a one and done, but more of an exploration of yourself, of what you need, of what you know, and of what others have to offer. So don't stop at the first thing that emerges, and recognize that your needs and the needs of others actually change over time. And that's okay. You can get involved with the community today, and then you can gracefully bow out and move on to something when your needs change. That's okay. So here's a couple of examples of kind of what it looks like in my life, and what that might look like in your life is going to be completely different, and that's okay. A long time ago, in a land far away, I am a Sands fan, as you could probably tell from the plethora of letters after my name, and I've been a learner there for a long time. Actually, the first thing that I ever was published in a long time ago was called a community consensus project put out by Sands. So I've been to a lot of Sands conferences as a learner, booth marketer, and a lot of vendor conferences. And I've been a Sands mentor for a course or two. And so that means that I have a personal connection to several Sands educators. And one of them called me at one point and was like, hey, you really need to get on this webcast. You want to listen to what this woman is going to say when she gets on. Her name is Tara. And so Tara wrote her book. And if you don't know Tara, she wrote Woman in Tech. And through Sands, I kind of connected with Tara. And since that time, we've kind of built this friendship. She's been a coworker. We have this kind of mutual support system. And if you look real carefully, you'll even find my name in her book somewhere. But that was part of me. I was doing my best to amplify the voice because women in tech is such an important cause to me. So I got on and I did my best to amplify the voice. And that was a contribution I could make to that community at the time. Similarly, I am a scouting parent, both Girl Scouts and Scouts BSA. And so I was in a scout troop, and the parents were talking about their children who were going to the new high school the following year. And they were talking about the high school was brand new, so it didn't have any clubs yet. And they were trying to figure out, hey, what kind of clubs would these rising freshmen be interested in doing? And they talked about, has anybody heard about this thing called Cyber Patriot? Some of the scouts were interested. Some of the parents were interested. A bunch of us worked in cybersecurity, and that's how we all became kind of Colgan Cyber Patriot coaches and mentors and made that happen. But the community itself actually started out at the scout meetings. And I'm not sure that that journey would have been the same had we come up kind of not connected in scouts first. So it's really important to recognize that your journey into the community can be as important as finding that community that you fit into. Your path forward kind of, looks like this. You want to think about your opportunities and your assets. You want to think about what you enjoy. You want to think about who is in your posse that you can depend on, and who is in your network, and what are your current resources. And remember that that's two ways. What do you need and what do you have? And when I talk about resources, I don't just mean like what's in your brain, but I also mean think very carefully about your time. Do you have a day a year you could maybe dedicate to this? An hour a month? Do you love to review papers in the evening with a glass of wine, and would you be willing to give your feedback? Do you have an account where you can boost others? Share the mic in cyber might be loving to talk to you. Do you love to talk? Do you hate to talk, but you love to read? Do you hate to read and talk, but you love to write? What if all you can do is applaud and smile? Like, park yourself in the front seat of a conference and do that. What if all you can do is bake, or you think that's what you can give right now? You know what? The next time a Log4j comes around, go ahead and bake banana bread for your sock. Trust me, that's a contribution to the community right there. If your best time to contribute is between 2 and 4 a.m., I've captured the flag moms that'll be happy to talk to you. If you don't like to attend conferences, don't think that's the only way you can do it. And a lot of the conferences have volunteer roles that you can slide into without ever having attended the conference at all. If you have a social media account, there's all sorts of things that you can do. Think about cross promotion, think about education. If you remember nothing else from today, remember this. Signal boosts and encouragement in this day and age cannot be underestimated. It is very little effort to be kind and encouraging, and that fuels people to continue their journey and continue forward. Everyone has weak ties, and everyone has that ability to strengthen you, but you need to start the journey to strengthen your network and make sure that you've got that connection into the different communities you're already probably a part of. So you want to start this journey by kind of remembering the basics. Everyone has something to offer, and everyone has something to need. And this is a marathon and not a sprint. And remember again that your needs and abilities change over time. The important thing is that you know your value and you pick your reasons. And that's why we love Peggy Carter, because she knows her values, and everyone else's opinion doesn't really matter. I had somebody ask me once, why did I think that Cyber Patriot was a good fit for me? And the answer really was simple. I wanted to spend more times with my kids. My kids are perfectly happy to do cyber challenges. And that meant that if I could make time to be a tech mentor, I could spend more time with my kids serving as a tech mentor for their teams. So there are opportunities for real life and tech life to overlap, and you want to take advantage of those as you're defining your community and thinking about your resources. So here's my check the mirrors warning. If you are interested in submitting talks, please find someone to review your talk submission, and please do yourself a favor and review your corporate policies and make sure you're allowed to talk about what you're going to talk about. If you're social media bound, be sure to review your corporate policies. Your organization doesn't always publish what they expect of you. And if you're not sure, make sure to check with somebody, because you don't want to be the person who commits to doing something that you can't actually do because you've discovered that it's a violation of your policies. I have a couple places to start. PancakesCon, all of us here are volunteers. Cyber Patriot is always looking for volunteers. Share the Mic in Cyber is a really great way to amplify voices and make sure that you have a way to lift other people up. And if you're looking for a conference in your area, I'm going to tell you to reach out and find out where your B-Sides conference is. They will also happily look for places like that. There's also a couple non-traditional places. I'm a big fan of the Hacker Book Club. Project CS Girls, I'm a big fan of the Sisters mailing list. I actually reconnected with somebody I knew from high school because I was in the Sisters mailing list, which made to some very, very great opportunities to kind of reconnect and strengthen those weak ties. So when you're thinking about strengthening your weak ties, you want to find the Twitter of your LinkedIn and find the LinkedIn of your Twitter or whatever social media you're on. Find out who they follow, who have common interests to you, and that gives you an opportunity to make your links stronger. Find a common place to survey what interests people have, to lurk, to collaborate, and look beyond the obvious. Look to your Slack channels, your Discords, your mailing lists. And if you have a favorite, why don't you pop it in the Slack so other people can maybe join you there to lurk and collaborate. I'm sure people will always be willing to chat with each other. And there's nothing wrong with saying, hey, I chatted with you on the Slack at PancakesCon, and I'm interested in Dungeons and Dragons and saw you had some comments on that. Whatever it is that connects you to that person. Always contributing to your community, you want to sort of start with, what do we have in common? And that makes it much easier to make that journey. All right, so that's kind of my remembering that you need to know who you know, what you know, and how you learn. That will absolutely fuel and inform your journey as you travel through. If I did this right, I'm about 20 minutes in. I'm happy to take questions and comments at the end, and I'll be in the Slack discussion, but I do want to move on to the second part of this, which is something completely different, which is about scrapbooking. So we've all heard the saying that once it's on the internet, it's there forever. But computers and the internet don't always apply the best context. Properly preserving and archiving your pictures for the future gives everyone something to look at, even when the power goes out, or you're in the middle of a pandemic, or the cloud goes down. And it can help connect you to folks when you don't get a chance to see them in perhaps 2 years or a very long while. Scrapbooking teaches us with minimal tools and just a little perseverance, you can capture memories in tangible ways for the future. A lot of people say, hey, why do I get to talk to you about scrapbooking? And a long time ago, I actually worked when I was a kid, preserving memories of some of the senior citizens in our town. Through living history programs, we would record them, we would sort through their memorabilia, and we would try to preserve those for the future. One of my very first jobs was as a photomat photomate. I don't know if anybody remembers those little kiosks, but I used to work in one. And I worked my way through the school in my work study at the library. My husband, when I met him, was a professional photographer. And about 20 years ago, I was a creative memories consultant, which Creative Memories used to be this big scrapbooking company. I don't actually know if they're still doing it. But archiving and preserving memories and stories is just a thing that has always been important. And so when we talk about scrapbooking, when I talk about scrapbooking, we are talking about preserving a story for the future. Many rainy days when my kids were young, we would sit around and look at our books of photos. For children, that's way more engaging than scrolling through a screen is. They connect to the paper, they touch it, and they have some of this texture and this context that Giles says it's there and then it's gone if it's on the computer. But you really want to think about, how do you make the pictures and those memories tangible so that it lasts? It's so important. So as I switch to this next part, and I'm going to stop sharing so that I can show you kind of what I'm working on, I wanted to give you a little bit of, this is all about preserving the story. One of the tricky things in particular is that if you try to do this much farther down the line, time can add to the concept of that unreliable narrator. You don't necessarily remember everything about the photos on your phone. So I'm going to show you a little bit to kind of talk through the steps you're going to follow, which is to select, mount, journal, and enhance. I'll show you the tools I'm using, but then I'll also talk a little bit about projects that where you or somebody else has probably already done the work, and that should make it easier for you to just get started and put a couple things down to preserve for the future. The reality is we're in unprecedented times. So preserving right now, hey, how did you feel about the pandemic, or what do you remember about it, will save you loads of trouble later. Because one of the things that I was always sad about, I don't know, can I even see it? I can't see my screen, can I? One of the things I was always sad about was that I couldn't ever tell, I didn't save as much as I should have from 9/11. So when my kids came to me and said, hey, Mom, what do you remember about 9/11? I didn't have so many physical things to give them. So hopefully you all can see me. Somebody give me a heads up. Can you still see me if I move over here? Perfect.
Yeah, looks good.
Okay. So that's really trouble. I regret I didn't print out all the wonderful emails that I got from friends in New York City and about their experiences. So when you think about that in the context of today, when somebody asks you, hey, we learned in school about the last time a pandemic occurred, what do you remember? Think about what is happening right now and look at the pictures that are being posted and imagine looking at these in 20 years. What would you talk about them? What would you say to somebody about them? So when I'm talking about getting started, I'm going to talk about things to get you started today. The first thing we're going to talk about is selecting. So select what you are preserving. It's important to think about what is commonplace now, which might be different in many years. What car are you driving? What house do you live in? You select the best photo and then you select the best part of this photo. So I'm actually putting together a page now called Quarantine Nights. It's a partner to a page that starts with COVID days. And hopefully if you all can see this, this is kind of what my full picture looks like. But the only part I'm interested in is the bottom part of the photo. So what I do when I'm selecting the parts of the photo is I actually use a little paper cutter because it makes it much easier for me. And I just line it up and I say, okay, I'm selecting that part of the photo. And now it's this big. And that gives me a little more room on my page as I'm doing things. And I selected that part of the photo because the top part is not important. What is important is when the pandemic began, I had to move my desk and move into this corner of the room. And so that helps me focus on things. The second part of what you're going to try to do is to mount. And that means picking what I put this on and how I do it. So I tend to stick with what are called tape runners, which is essentially a tool like this, and it's got a little sticky thing on it, and I hold on to this part of it and I stick it on the picture, and that gives me a line of kind of double-sided tape on the back. And I do that because that's a tool I'm used to. There's lots of different tools you can use, and I'm certainly not a snob about what you're doing. I'm a fan of them, but there's lots of options. So mounting corners, you may want to remove. If they're photos you may want to remove at some point are good because those are, you can take in and out. Photo mounting sleeves are also good. You want to also think a little bit about your background because your page can be quite overwhelming and big. And what I've done in this case is I've used what I call kind of this pop of color here on the side. Can you all see that? I don't know. And I do that because I try to make sure that the blank space is not overwhelming and it can add to my story. The third step is to think about journaling. When you think about journaling, this is where people tend to get a little squirrely, and including me, I used to get a little bit squirrely about it because pictures are worth 1,000 words, but what we're trying to do here is preserve the story. So you need to make sure you tell it. The great thing is you don't have to do it all at the same time, and you can pick the ways. People get squirrely here because a lot of people tell me they hate their handwriting, they want to type it up so it looks neat. Don't do that. And the reason I tell you don't do that is because I keep my dad's old notebook just so I can read his handwriting. So trust me that that handwriting is going to be somebody's treasured memory later on. You don't want to wait for someday when you can type it up because someday never comes. So get your words down. Pen does make a difference. Make sure it is waterproof, fade resistant, and permanent. Now you can say, I'm not a person who does a lot of writing. That's okay. There's lots of different ways that you can journal. And in this page, see, I have a picture. I don't know, am I too close if I do that? This is a picture of my husband and I. It was about probably February of 2000, and we're in Colorado. But if you look at the picture, you wouldn't actually know that, right? So if you capture the story in bullets, I tell you it's February. This is the view from Buffalo Bill's grave. We're on the Colorado mountain, and I'm there because I was training with African affiliates in Denver. That's a way that works fine. I could also just do a quick caption. George and I take a break from playing American tour guides for the African affiliates to enjoy the Colorado scenery. I know what I'm doing. I know where I am. And then I can do a much longer storyteller if that's important to me. So think about your captions and your journaling and think about what that means to you. The last thing you want to sort of think about is enhancing. And this is where you get to enhance your story a little bit. My favorite way to do this is to soften the edges of my photograph. And I do that, you see these sharp edges, with what's called a corner rounder. And essentially I just pop this in here and I click here. And what happens is the edges become rounded. It's a fun and quick way to make sure that it's not as harsh an ending as other things. And there's lots of different rounders out there. I actually have a Christmas one that puts little Christmas trees in the edge of it. So you do that sort of thing, and you see I've already done it for this photograph. Here's my other second Buffy reference. I don't know if you see that. And you do that. The other way that you can enhance is just by stickers. Who doesn't love stickers, right? And so I oftentimes just grab a couple stickers and I kind of put that down here. So then I end up with sort of a page that looks like this. And this is my quarantine nights page. And it says some nights seemed busier than pre-COVID. Fancy Fridays for mom and a virtual prom for George. So this is me as I was attending one of Alyssa's fancy Friday nights, and that same night my son ended up at his virtual prom. And when we set up his virtual prom, in the background I had set up this slideshow of prom scenes from famous TV shows and movies. So I had like Buffy and Footloose and a couple other things just kind of playing on rotation in the background with all of his balloons and things like that. And having a husband with photographic backgrounds was certainly helpful to this experience. So what I'm going to do with this page is, this is my page of the pictures. I'm going to journal entirely this story on the back of this page. So that helps people kind of think things through. Similarly, this is my PancakesCon page from my 2000 album. From my 2020 album. So when I say people love stickers, I always order my stickers and I get them all up. But I've also put in like pictures from people's Twitter accounts where they were paying attention to the talks. So and the story that I'm telling on this page is about how tech people took to the internet to leverage their talent and resources, and online conferences such as PancakesCon supported social distancing while still sharing information. So that's a memory. In 20 years, at some point, somebody will have of that. And that's important, right? Now, you may be looking at all this and thinking, this is overwhelming. So think about some of the projects that you could do right now. I'm going to share some of my favorites that I do every January. The first is, if you get picture cards for the holidays from family, that's wonderful. That means somebody else has already done the hard work for you. You want to put them in the album. Grab them all, stick a sheet of red down the side, and start sticking them on the pages. It is so fun to see how family grows and changes over time, and gives the kids something to look at when they only see their cousins or their friends once a year. And you can usually finish these pages by New Year's. I tell people this, and originally when I used to tell people this, it was because my kids were very young and they didn't always have the long-term memory that had them recognizing their teenage cousins or the other people that we would see in the summertime or things like that. And so before we went on trips, I would always pull out the Christmas albums and show them, remember cousin Andy and cousin Karen and their kids, and this is what they look like. And that's awesome. In recent years, I've had a second use for them as my mother has gotten older, because she doesn't always remember the context of some of the people and visitors she has. So I can't stress enough how useful those photo cards are to people like me who use them for things like that. And so that's the first thing I would encourage you. Someone else has already done the hard work of selecting photos and selecting their best parts of those photos, and they've put them on a card. all you need to do is stick that down on pages. You don't even necessarily need to tell stories at that point because their names are usually on the cards. So I would encourage you to think about that. The second thing is, I am one of those photocard families, and I've been a photocard family since I originally got married, and that's fine. And originally, when you did photo cards, you could only have one picture. So when I started scrapbooking, I would in fact put together a page that became my photo card and take a picture of that page. So this would be the page I would put together, and then my photo card would end up looking something like this. And what I started doing, this is my picture from my husband and I in our land down under. What I started doing that year in 2001 is laminating these on a sheet of double-sided wrapping paper to make a placemat. So this 11 by 17 sheet of paper, I would laminate it, and that would give me a placemat, a wipe down placemat. Well, times have changed, technology has changed, and now you're not limited to one thing. So it's actually much easier for me. So I now do this same thing, and I have had to change the paper in the 20 years I've been doing it because I ran out of paper off the first roll. So now I'm on blue paper, but I do the same thing, and I stick my pictures on here, my cards on here, and on the back I actually now put the letter that I send along with my photo card. And what that means is now I have 20 placemats, which is good, but I also have these kind of 20 years of memories where, again, I've already done the hard work. I selected the photos to put them on the card. So you know what? I'm just going to laminate it and stick it there. And again, loads of fun. There's nothing so much fun as having your high school child come and bring their girlfriend or boyfriend over and be able to stick out these placemats from when they were very little. So that's fun. So that's the second project that I would recommend to people to sort of think about. But because the technology has changed since I started this, I'll also encourage you to think of more things. Start on a much smaller scale. Is there a favorite trip or a favorite memory, or maybe just about quarantine and COVID in general is a time period you want to kind of put things together? And when you do that, there are many, many services where you can kind of put together a book that just captures those pictures, and you can send them digitally to a service and it'll put it together. So this is many years ago, I took my kids and we took a barge down the Erie Canal, and this is kind of our trip down there. I didn't do heavy journaling except for the first page where I explained about the trip, and then the rest of it is just pictures of our journey, and actually lyrics from the song Low Bridge Everybody Down. I don't know if people know that song, but it's now playing in my head. So there you go. You might get me to break into song after all, but it just captures that moment in time for me. Finally, if we are sort of our well-curated social media people, you're already doing the hard work. You're already picking and choosing what you want to share and what you think will be important for the future. And when you do that sort of thing, you should find a way to preserve it. So again, there's lots of opportunities and lots of services that will do that. My aunt, before she passed away, was actually an archivist down in New Orleans. And the last time she was visiting DC was actually to see what she considered her letter at Smithsonian. She had loaned it to the Smithsonian for one of their displays. And so she came up and we went down to the Smithsonian. We got into a big discussion about how, because so many people have their memories digitally, how do we preserve them for the future? And I told her that what I do at the end of every year is I take a dump of all my social media posts and I essentially throw them into a book. And I do that, and the books are varying lengths, but I do it on the 1st of January every year. And the book goes from last January 1st to this January 1st. And it essentially pulls in all my social media posts and tells me, you know, what my comment was and the picture that I sent at that point. And sometimes there are other things I shared, like this one, which is one of my favorite Muppet episodes with Gilda Radner in it. And sometimes there are things that are happening right then. So I do that every year. I pull it out, and in the past year, since my daughter's been home in the pandemic and my son has gone off to school, she's been flipping through them and kind of pulling out her favorite pictures to send to people, because it is much easier to flip through a book and find what you're referencing than to try to go back with 5,000 photos and find the one photo you're looking at. You've already done the hard work. You've curated for your social media feed. I would encourage you to find a way to preserve that in a much more sustainable way. If not for yourself, then for those of us that at some point will be looking for that information. So think about that. The point is to find a lasting way to preserve your stories. They are yours, and will give many different perspectives on the past that will be treasured in ways you can't even begin to imagine, based on kind of where we are right now and where we're headed. The whole unprecedented times can make it super uncomfortable to talk to your kids about right now, but think about how much harder it will be to talk to them about it in 15 years, which is when they get into high school and they'll come back and start asking you, because they won't remember if they're super young. But your ability to capture that information right now is really going to make a difference in the future. Okay, so that's sort of where I am. How am I doing on time?
Got 4 minutes.
I've got 4 minutes. I'm happy to take questions. I'll slide back here if there's any questions.
I want you to know that I'm sure everybody loved your presentation as much as I did, and that they thoroughly paid attention, but most of the chat was heavily Buffy oriented.
Well, hopefully everybody got my Buffy references then. My son said to me, nobody's ever going to catch Willow and Oz in the background there, Mom.
He underestimated the amount of fans at this con, so yes, they did.
Well,
yes,
good.
Yes, they did.
You can always count on me to sneak in a Buffy reference or two. So, yeah.
Yeah.
I actually used to have a talk called Everything I Learned About Information Security I Learned from Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
Oh my gosh. Do you have it? Is there a recording or a link or
there
anything?
There is none.
Oh.
Maybe I'll submit that next year.
That's too bad. All right. Yeah, you need to do that one next. Okay. Let's see. I personally just wanted to say, I appreciated your, warning, if you cannot do all of these or none of these, everything is okay still. So that was really great to hear. I know a lot of people are struggling.
Right, and that's the point. Build your community to support you and find your way to support them back at the pace that is available to you.
Totally agree. And then you mentioned Tara Wheeler's book, which is, I can confirm, an amazing book. So don't just take Meg's word for it. It's awesome. Did you guys both work together now or in the past, or
no? So when I was at Semantic, Tara was at Semantic for a while too.
Got it.
So, but we knew each other before then, and now we know each other after. So
right. Okay. Yeah, and a lot of people were thumbs up for the banana bread for your sock, because any little thing helps. I know I personally saw something that was saying did anyone get bonuses after helping with Log4j? And people were just people got bonuses, and a lot of people were I didn't even get a thank you, So
yes, I mean, again, whatever you can do, believe me, it's recognized. So
yep. Someone asked if they don't have a big following on Twitter, and I know a lot of people already replied, but if they don't have a big following on Twitter, is it worth to post things you're working on or advice you may have and things like that?
Absolutely, because you don't get a following on Twitter unless you start posting on Twitter. So it's one of those things, especially if you're cross promoting. So then, because of what you're interested in and you're working on, if you then say you post, hey, I was at PancakesCon, and PancakesCon retweets your post, a bunch of people are going to be like, hey, this guy's interested in photography and so am I, so maybe I'll follow him. And that's how you get kind of the following. So um,
Exactly.
I'm a huge believer in making sure that you amplify each other's voices, if for no other reason, then it makes the person feel good, like they've reached out and they've made that connection. So
Absolutely. Well, I know we're at time. I just wanted to say I am in awe of your creativity and all the tips and tricks, and also I don't know what's happening behind you, but it looks like a whole bunch of fun.
oh, my daughter's
there's-
birthday.
okay, I was like, there's a lot of crafting going on. I like it.
Yeah, you know.
Thank you so much, Meg.
Absolutely my pleasure.